Revelation 12:11 says, "And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Welcome to the Word of Their Testimony podcast.
Yes, Lord, your will.
Okay, well, thank you, Madison, for being here today. I am so excited. It was really great getting together with you the other weekend and talking over coffee and hearing more about your journey. I was just really impressed by how far you've come and just in awe of how Jesus has been working in your life. And I was so moved by what you share with me and just getting to know your heart more for Jesus. And I'm really excited. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I can't wait to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about my journey, I'm impressed how far I've come. But obviously, I owe it all to God. And so I want to share some of that, some more of that with you. Because I know when we were at coffee, I only gave you a couple minutes of my journey. But I am going to focus kind of on the last couple years of my life. But when I was younger, I grew up in the church. So I've always had a thought of Jesus, like Jesus was part of the conversation because my grandparents are pastors. So grew up, hearing about Jesus and going to church with them, but not really understanding my part in it, how I fit into Jesus' story. And I think a lot of us, when we're younger, we think of God as just a disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of my childhood, especially because of the type of people my grandparents are, I love them, but they do have more of a religious spirit. Mm-hmm. And they wanted you to follow the Bible word for word. So my grandmother's never worn pants, never worn high heels, never worn a dress above her knees. So just, super religious. And that came off more, I think, than the love of Jesus part.
It was the relationship with Jesus was not really the focus. It was more the religion.
Yeah, it was more follow the rules, and then Jesus loves you.
Okay.
And not Jesus loves you. And because he loves you, you should follow the rules. It was flip-flopped. So grew up just thinking that, God's watching me and I have to try and do these right things. And obviously I, messed up. And I think that me messing up and because I didn't have the relationship part, I just was like, well, God doesn't love me now. And having a strained relationship with my dad, I think really played into me seeking the attention of boys and wanting to fill that hole in my heart. My dad just wasn't around. And so I didn't learn the love of a father like I should have. So that led me down some pretty dark roads. I had my first kid when I was 18. I got pregnant my senior year, almost didn't graduate. And me and my mom had a really strained relationship. So trying to, telling her I was pregnant as a senior was really tough. She knew my grandparents weren't going to accept kid or me. And so that was pretty rough.
Did they not accept you after?
No, I mean, I've always been the black sheep. My mom was the black sheep. She moved out of their house, had kids out of wedlock. And so that was already their problem child. And then I was my mom's problem child. So it was compounding that relationship of your sins or your mom's sins. And now you're just so much worse. And so, that relationship with my maternal grandparents really was strained. And I think that my mom didn't know how to accept my son because I wasn't married and wasn't living right. And, she remarried and the relationship with my stepdad was really hard because he wasn't my dad and I wanted my dad, even though I didn't really know him, but always just seeking that male, that reaffirmation, I guess. Yeah, so I fell into the temptations of the world, which was sex, drugs, alcohol.
Yep.
And I fell into that hard. The devil definitely convinced me that if I sought love in other areas, then I would find fulfillment. It sucks that I had to go through that and have broken relationship after broken relationship, and then I didn't choose to stay with Caden's dad, with my son's dad. Then I met my daughter's father, and he was not a great guy. I got pregnant with my daughter, and I don't know. It was I just, at that point, I felt like I was just kind of throwing my life away. I was just like, okay, like, I love my son and I'm glad that I had him, but like, I've not done this right. And now I'm now going to have another kid. I'm not going to be with that person's dad. And so it was just like these unhealthy cycles just kept continuing, and that just kept me bound to like this unhealthy life, and I didn't know how to escape. And honestly, Jesus was always there. Like, I would go to church and I would have these moments of like feeling close to him and being like, okay, I know the path I need to be on, but really the temptation in the world, that's what I was being conformed to, was the patterns of this world. And
so you were still going to church during this time?
yeah, I would go to church. I had different churches I would attend, and I would go for maybe 6 months and things would look better. It's like I always knew right from wrong. I always knew sin from walking a godly life because I grew up, you know, knowing the rules.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would go to church, try and walk like a straight line, and then I would make a mistake and suffer the consequences. And that would just pull me back. It's like the speed bumps, so many speed bumps, trying to, you know, stay on this right path. And I just keep like getting ran off the road. And then I'm in the ditch, and the distractions of that, of just struggling, not living, you know, righteously. God knew where he needed to meet me. And that's why my story is so powerful, because God knows where he needs to meet you. He knows exactly how he needs to speak to you, how he needs to show up in your life to impact you, to set you on the right path to a point where you'd never want to turn away. And so when my daughter was 2.5, her dad was back in jail. And mine and his relationship was tumultuous, and we had broken up, gotten back together, broken up, and he was in and out of jail. And at this point, he was in jail. She was 2.5. And I just remember crying out to God because I had a rough relationship with Caden's father, 2 different dads. And my son's dad, he was not around. And then this other dad's in prison. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this cannot be my life. And I'm sure I was dating other people too, you know, just like living in the world, not committed to anyone or anything, especially not committed to God. I just remember crying out to him and saying, Lord, either these men are going to be good fathers to my children, and Lord, so like cultivate that relationship or break the relationship. Either they need to step up and, you know, really be there and help me raise these children, or Lord, take them away, take these poor parents away, because I can't do this. I can't keep trying to force someone to be my kid's dad, you know, especially growing up in a broken home and knowing the pain of not having your father and wanting them and all of those things. So I prayed this prayer and that night God came to me in a dream, in a vision, and he spoke to me in a crazy and powerful way. Basically, he told me that my daughter would be molested by her dad, and that I would need to keep her home the first day of kindergarten because I would know that something was wrong with her. If I didn't keep her home, I would never find out, and that I would not live a happy life, and just told me this crazy thing. Wow. And I just remember waking up the next morning and being like, what? That was not real. That was not God. That was not real. I don't know what that was, but it just felt like a really crazy dream that couldn't be fact. Honestly, I probably laughed it off like in an uncomfortable way, but you know, like, no, that was not real. I don't know what that was, but that was not God. And you know, hindsight, it's like I've read stories in the Bible where God comes and tells people like, oh, well, you're going to have a child. And they laugh, you know, so they're like, no, what? I'm however old, you know, I'm 60 something years old. So I woke up from that dream, and because it was just so not based in reality, I couldn't accept it as fact. And so I just went about my life and dove deeper into drugs. The next couple years was using pretty often, and it's approaching, you know, my daughter's about to start kindergarten and it's summertime, and I just remember really being like strung out like a lot, like every day. That's what I was seeking, and not choosing my children. My children were with my parents all the time. I was out partying, and I was pulling back up to my mom's house, and it was my daughter's first day of kindergarten, and it was like 7 in the morning or 6:50 in the morning. And I remember pulling into my mom's driveway and thinking, okay, I got to go inside and wake her up. But I did know something was wrong with her. I knew that something had happened to her, 3 weeks prior, and I didn't know what had happened. I just knew like someone had touched her, someone had molested her, something had happened, and I kept asking her about it, and she was just like, nothing happened, mommy, nothing happened. And so from when I found out until, 3 weeks later, I was just in like a fog of like walking around in denial, not knowing how to fix the problem, knowing that something happened to her and being super scared, but also I'm on drugs, so it's like I'm not in a good headspace to even be able to fix the problem. And every time I asked her about it, she just would, I'd be like, did this person touch you? Did this person? Did your brother? No, mommy, no, mommy, no, mommy. Just no, mommy. So pulling up to my mom's house, about to go wake my kid up for the first day of kindergarten. And God reminded me of that dream, which I had forgotten about. It was out of sight, out of mind, hadn't even thought about it. And he reminded me of that dream, and it was the best day of my life. I just remember getting out of the car, because I was still in the car when he reminded me. It was like a wave of memory. And I remember getting out of the car and like dropping to my knees and just saying, oh God, you're real. Oh God, you're real. Like, you are real. You are real. You love me. You love my children. Like, I just felt his love. Like, this person that I didn't know really until that moment. And I felt that just his love comforting me in the worst day of my life, because he's also telling me in that same moment, that, she was hurt. She was hurt by her dad. And you know that something's wrong with her. You've known for 3 weeks. And so is the reality of like, my life is so broken, but I'm so loved in this moment. And my children are so loved in this moment, and it was just amazing. I went inside, and he was like I had a direct line of communication with God, and he was just telling me everything that I needed to say to her to remind her that she was loved. It was like the love that he was showing me, I was able to turn around and verbally, like express that to my daughter. And just tell her, if someone hurt you and this, someone who was supposed to protect you hurt you, you have to tell me. And McKinley, you are so valued. You are so loved. Like, you have a purpose in this world and all of these things. Like, and remind you, I'm high on meth. Like, I'm like drugged out, but instantly sober. So it's just this, like, I can't even describe with words what that moment felt like, but it was a sobering moment, a joyful moment, a heartbreaking moment, all in one. And he needed to come to me like that. He needed to come to me 2.5 years before it happened, so that I could know without a shadow of a doubt that, what was truth from lies. Because I had been manipulated by this person, by the world, by the devil. I had been manipulated and believed all of these lies. And God just spoke so much truth. And he did it, 2.5 years before. So I guess the overarching theme of my testimony is like, God loves us as a father. He loves us as his children, and he doesn't want to see us suffer. And I've just been able to heal so much from that moment. Like, I can't say I stopped doing drugs and drinking and smoking immediately, but within 6 months I was sober.
Wow.
And I never had to go to rehab. I was able to get a protective order for my daughter. And so when I prayed that prayer, and God, he removed the unhealthy relationship. And the relationship with my son's dad, he's still cultivating. And I do believe, because he hasn't removed that relationship, that ultimately it's going to be a blessing. And my son's dad just got baptized. So I can
praise God.
I can see God working. And the fruits of all of this is that I'm sober. My children are safe and happy. They live with me. They know the love of God as their father. And I don't have to believe the lies of the enemy anymore, And he tried really hard, even after that day, to convince me of so many lies. And God was right there, just reminding me that I was loved, and that I was his child, and that we each are loved that much by God. And it's hard when I see people struggling who haven't had that encounter yet, that life-altering encounter because they're still living in the lies. They're believing the lies. They're living without that love and without that, just the hug of the Father. And so I hope that this story does encourage people. The reality is that Jesus is real. He is real. He loves us. He came and died on the cross, and he just wants to be your Father. He wants to save you from your past sins, from your future sins. I'm just so thankful that God loved me enough to show up in my life in such a powerful way, because it hasn't just affected my life. It's affected my children's lives, which in return have affected the lives of the people they come into contact with. And part of my testimony is now my kids. And this crazy way that God intervened in my story, right? He came and spoke to me in a vision, which, you know, is so cool. But that's now part of their story. And they have tangible evidence of God's love.
That was so powerful and inspiring. The way that you grew up in the religion, thinking that you had to like earn your way into right standing with God, and that there were all these rules you had to follow to get God to like love you. And then God's like, okay, this is how I'm going to meet with Madison. This is how I'm going to show her. That's incredible. Like, you became sober 6 months later. Without any rehab, without any treatment, he changed you. It's just so powerful to me to hear that, like, when you were raised in the church, but it was very much about like the religion and the rules. And then you had this radical encounter with Jesus. He helped you get sober. And now you're like learning to have a personal relationship with Jesus. How did you learn to cultivate that?
I think what is so amazing is that, like you were saying, like I thought that I had to earn my way, right? And it's like the thief on the cross. He accepted God, and Jesus said, okay, I'm going to meet you in paradise today. And he didn't need to get down off of the cross and fix his life and do all of these things to correct his past and live on the straight and narrow. God accepted him that day on a cross. That was the consequence of his sins, was he was hung on a cross right next to Jesus. And so I think learning that reality of like, I don't have to fix all of these things. I just have to choose the next right thing. I just have to say yes to Jesus today. And the fact that even when he gave me the dream, I was sinning. The day he saved me, high on meth in my mom's driveway, that is the moment that he chose to show up in my life in the biggest way, was when I was at my lowest, when my daughter was broken, my son was hurting, you know, when my life was at its worst, in the pit. I mean, it's just that love. It's that compassion of him being the amazing shepherd and chasing after me, chasing after my heart. When you know that love, when you feel it so tangibly, you want to be near it. You know, you don't want to lose it. And so I think that the fear of losing that, or, you know, anything like pulling me away, was scary. And drugs were going to pull me away. Sin was going to pull me away from that. So I was able to, you know, slowly take each day at a time, step by step, and say yes to whatever it was that Jesus was asking me to do that day. Now I look back and it is a radical change, but we have a radical God. He poured his love out so much for us that he died on a cross for us. And so it was that encounter. I was able to really move forward and let go of my past, let go of the things that were holding me and binding me. And it's not just the love of God and Jesus, it's the community that he placed me in. And I'm so thankful for that, you know, because everyone is going to have a different encounter with God, and it's going to shape their life differently. And it's just a beautiful like tapestry that God is weaving together with each of our lives. It's beautiful.
Oh, my goodness.
I honestly look forward to seeing what he's going to do with my kids' lives, because I know that they know him. They have both chosen to get baptized, and I don't know. It's awesome, and I'm excited to see where this road leads. So
oh my goodness. I'm just like speechless. That is such a powerful story, Madison. It's like God literally like reached down and was like, you are my child. I see you in your most broken moment. He held you and he guided you through this unimaginable situation and showed you his love and brought you to this place.
I think what's even more powerful too, when I really think about it, is that God knew that that could have broken me. Like I could have held on to that because eventually I would have found out. She would have eventually told me and it would have wrecked me and I would have had no hope of how to fix it. I would have had no hope, nothing to grasp at. And it would have altered my life for the worst. You know, I would have held on to that pain and that resentment, and that's what would have shaped me. And so it's like when I talk about my story to people and, you know, I share what happened to us, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, don't be. Because of God and his love, my life has changed for the better. Yeah, it took this really terrible thing happening and that's awful. And I wish that I could fix that. But God is like bringing beauty from these ashes. So that's the encouragement I'm going to give to everyone else is like, don't let the pain keep you in those dark moments because God definitely wants to use it for his glory.
So true. Like it even says in his word, God works all things together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Yeah. Wow. So good, sister. Thank you so much for sharing with me. Oh, that was incredible. If you were blessed by this episode, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future testimonies. And if you want to pass on the blessing to others, please leave a review and share to your page. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.